as we welcome Dave Helman into the program. I imagine on West Coast time, waking up early for us. Thank you, Dave. I hope you've had a better morning than Scotty Scheffler.
Oh, no, I think Scotty had an amazing morning. I mean, what a story. Like, to go from the slammer to the fairway, like, that's good. Like, I'm pumped for him that he gets to add that story to his growing legend. Which, crazy. Like, I woke up earlier this morning and saw it at like 4:00 West Coast time. Like, goodness gracious. I'm having a less eventful morning than Scotty. That's for sure.
This has to be a one-of-one historical situation. The first ever dude making it behind bars and making his tee time all within a matter of hours.
Yeah,
this is the first of its kind.
If it was tee time and not playing field, yeah. Well, I guess like never actually ended up. I guess Calvin Joseph never actually ended up behind bars, but
I guess.
Well done, Dave.
Go Tigers, Dave.
Go Tigers.
Go
Dave,
Tigers, baby. That's right.
I did want to ask you, as a draft show alum, I don't know if you got to really indulge in any of our draft coverage over the 3 days, but I was hoping we made you proud. I wonder if you could grade our performance, but maybe specifically Bobby's in the last 3 hours of day 3.
I checked in with y'all a couple times. I had other obligations that weekend, so I couldn't listen to the whole thing. I heard Bobby was just masterful there down the home stretch. That's what I was told.
He
Carried the program on my back, Dave.
Great teammate. Just always willing to do what's asked of him. Really a stupendous job. Really making me very proud, because pettiness over everything. And I think Bobby gets that, and that's why we're such good friends.
Yeah,
so, I was very proud.
Well, me carrying the show like that, like I did, Dave, I think that's how kind of I get a big head, and some might say I'm arrogant for that. It's just because, like, those performances that I put out there. Yeah,
not you. Nobody would ever say that about you.
Well, I mean, one person said it at about 2:00 in the afternoon that day. But anyway, Zach, go ahead.
So that schedule release, Dave, what stood out to you about that?
I'm just glad it's over. I know it's a little too inside baseball, but like, I can't. I mean, I'm excited about the schedule in the very practical sense that now the season feels real. You can plan your road trips if you're going to go on one, or if you've got a wedding this fall, which game is, going to conflict with the wedding. There are practical reasons for it, but beyond that, I just don't really care. I mean, Aaron Rodgers is, my neighbor's dog is barking at me. Sorry about that. This is what happens when we walk our dogs in the morning. No, I think Aaron Rodgers is such a perfect example. You got 4 plays out of him last year. Why did we spend the entire offseason hyping all of that up? And, the Jets had 7 primetime games. They now have 6 this year. Hopefully it works out better than it did last year. But, yeah, in terms of getting excited, I just can't do it. I just can't.
Dave, this is something that we've kicked around recently with Archer, John Machota, just various people. Is this the lowest odds we've seen at any point during Dak Prescott's career about the idea of him being here long term? Like it feels very much like things are legitimately up in the air, more than they normally would be in a contract negotiation where we might feel like people are trying to find power plays or leverage points. This genuinely feels like this could come to a divorce at some point, even if it's not necessarily the likely scenario. It definitely feels like it's a possibility now.
Yeah, I think it's the most real that it's ever felt for me. And I'm not willing to say that it's going to happen, but it's starting to feel more likely than not to me. And the thing I realized a couple weeks ago is at the end of the day, it's really not up to the Cowboys at all, which is a weird thing to think about, because that's typically the way this stuff goes, where the Cowboys act like tough guys, and they say all the wrong things, and they don't want to do the deal. But then eventually cooler heads prevail, and when the deadline gets closer, the deal gets done and everybody's happy and it's kumbaya. But the thought occurred to me the other day that the Cowboys could make Dak what they see as a very fair offer this summer. They could offer to pay him $60 million a year. They could offer to set him at the top of the quarterback market. And Dak could still say no to that because he has that kind of leverage. Like, he has the no tag clause. They can't stop him from hitting free agency. They can't do anything about it. So if Dak and his people are like, no, we want the whole thing guaranteed, or we want 95% of it guaranteed. And if the Cowboys balk at that, there's nothing they can do. So it's just wild to think that they could make him an incredible offer, and it might not be good enough if he thinks that he could do that on the open market. If Dak hits the open market, remember Kirk Cousins did it when he went to Minnesota 4 or 5 years ago. Like, he could just be like, I want my entire contract guaranteed, and I only want to sign for 3 years. So he could sign a 3-year, $200 million contract that's fully guaranteed. Not sure if anybody would actually give him that, but he could go after it. So it's crazy to think that. I really think the ball is out of the Cowboys' court, in the sense of it's totally up to Dak whether he wants to sign what they offer him and if they're willing to meet those demands. So yeah, I think it's about as likely as it's ever felt for me that this is heading toward a separation.
It's Dave Helman with us here in the on 105 through the Fan. Almost said in the G-Bag Nation. So used to that as we're in the morning. Is the rumor of, I think it was your co-host or your coworker Nick Wright, throughout Belichick and Dak together going to the Giants? I mean, is that something that you could wrap your head around?
I can't really wrap my head around Dak being anywhere but Dallas, obviously. I mean, the guy was drafted there. He spent his whole career here. So, any team that he winds up on, it's going to seem weird to me. But I actually, for Fox Sports, maybe 2 weeks ago, I sat down and I tried my best to, think about the logical landing spots for Dak. And I came up with 7 teams ranging from very from obvious to not so obvious. And I think for a lot of reasons, I think the Giants top the list. I don't know about Bill Belichick, but in terms of a quarterback, it seems very obvious to me what the Giants are doing, which is keeping their powder dry for 2025. Daniel Jones's guarantees expire after this year. So starting in 25, they can cut him, and it's not going to affect their books. They'll save $20 million on the cap. The dead cap won't be very large. Obviously, they didn't draft a quarterback this year. They drafted Malik Neighbors. So their offense is starting to look like it's in good shape. I say starting to. It's definitely not great. But, they spent a ton of money on the offensive line in free agency. They've got Andrew Thomas, so they probably feel about that, feel like that's coming along. You add a blue chip talent like Neighbors to your receiver core, and if you're willing to pay Dak what he wants, you drop him in there, and I think it makes the Giants instantly competitive. Obviously, and Brian Daboll, offensive-minded head coach, helped develop Josh Allen. I'm positive Brian Daboll could come up with a good scheme to build around Dak Prescott. So it makes sense on a lot of levels. I don't know if it's the likeliest destination, but I do think it's one of the most obvious.
Dave, true or false, Ezekiel Elliott leads the Cowboys in carries for this upcoming season?
Oof, what a bleak question. No, I'm gonna say no. Or if he does, it'll be by a negligible number. I think, assuming nothing changes, assuming they don't add somebody or trade for somebody or something, I would guess it'll be Rico, or Rico and Zeke will be the leaders in the clubhouse. And I bet it would be pretty close. I'm going to guess the Cowboys leading ball carrier finishes with somewhere between 130 and 150 carries, something like that. So, Rico and Zeke I see as being at the top of the pecking order.
Dave, when you look at this offseason, everybody obviously got all worked up by the all-in comments, and everyone seems to be on this evaluation period now of a one-year deal, all your main players and everything else, and coaches for that matter. But when you take a look at that and see people saying they've lost a lot of depth, they didn't have enough to replace it, they didn't play in free agency, it's hard to make the argument for a lot of people right now that this team is better than it has been in the last couple of years. If we end the season and things are better, if they're a better football team by the time the 2024 season ends, they're better equipped heading into the playoffs, why will that be? What do you think is going to fall into place for this team this year that you would say, okay, that was an unforeseen part of this that was possible, but you weren't necessarily banking on it and it hit?
Okay, I have two thoughts to that. I mean, number one is obviously just if these draft picks hit on the offensive line. I mean, if Tyler Guyton is a dude with a capital D, then if Cooper Beebe is a solid center. I mean, if those guys are, I'm not going to say Guyton's going to be a one-of-one for Tyron, but like if Beebe is an improvement on Tyler Biadasz right away, and now you have 2 all-pro guards and a plus center, that's really exciting in terms of what your offense could be. Obviously from a run game perspective, but also just protecting the pocket for Dak and making his life easier. And if Tyler Guyton is at least good, like I said, I don't think it's fair to compare him to Tyron Smith on day one, but if he's at least good and not a liability, I think that would be huge. And then the Mike Zimmer effect, obviously. I mean, you already know your pass rush should be plus with Micah Parsons and DeMarcus Lawrence. If he can shore up the other aspects of it, have the defense be less leaky against the run, less boom or bust in terms of, guys hunting for big plays, and when it doesn't work out, explosive things happen. I mean, if he can correct some of that stuff, I think the floor is higher for the defense. So I think those two things would be my answer. But my point is, and I keep going back to that because you'll see people say like, oh, every year we wring our hands about this, and every year the Cowboys win 12 games. My thing is, who cares? I don't care if you win 12 games.
Yeah.
It's awesome that you can do it, and it is an impressive. It's impressive to be that stable and that consistent.
Yeah.
But nothing you can do in the regular season will convince me that you're ready to hang with the big boys because you've proven 3 years in a row that you can't. So they could win 13, and I don't think we're doing our jobs the right way if we are overly impressed by that, honestly, because it's all going to be about January. And are those improvements enough to overcome the San Franciscos of the world? I don't know. I tend to not think so. It would be incredibly impressive if they prove me wrong.
Spitting fire there, Dave. I agree with you. Regular season right now for them, it's what do you do in the postseason? I got one last one for you, but you brought up Mike Zimmer and Mozzie with all the weight loss. He's coming off the shoulder surgery. What do you think about Zim helping out Mozzie? Expectations for year 2?
This sounds mean, but it's in the same boat as the schedule release for me in the terms of just like I can't bring myself to care about stuff we're saying in May. And I mean, like, I'm jaded because I've done this for 10 years, and I know we need content, right? Like I'm not begrudging anybody that. Like, of course we've got to talk about this, and there's so much time to fill before the season kicks off. You can't just ignore it. But man, I've done this song and dance so many times. Like I remember so many training camps where it was, but Byron Jones is about to be an all-pro at safety, and it's going to make the difference. And Malik Collins is finally going to meet his potential at defensive tackle, and it's going to make the difference. Like, hopefully, that would be great. But I don't care about banking on the potential. Fortunately, and I don't mean this in a mean way. I really don't, because, like, defensive tackle is a hard position to transition to. I'm not giving up on Mozzie Smith, but he is in the fortunate situation where like anything is an improvement over what he gave you as a rookie. So if Mike Zimmer can develop him into a useful player who plays somewhere between like 30 and 60% of the snaps, like I said, that's an improvement over what you were getting. So fortunately for him, there's nowhere to go but up. But I've done this too many times to be sitting here, banking on somebody's potential as a reason to get excited.
Yeah. I mean, it's the art of setting the bar low. It's just,
Hey,
heady
if
play by
you don't
Mozzie.
have if you don't have expectations, then anything will make you happy. And I think that's always a good way to look at like year two guys. You know, Mike McCarthy loves to talk about the year two jump, and in some cases he's right. Like guys do make a year two jump, and it can be a big deal. But I'm just going to hang out and wait and see which one of them makes that leap, rather than sitting here concocting reasons why it could be Mozzie Smith or why it could be Luke Schoonmaker. Like I'm perfectly content to just wait and see.
Well, you go have yourself a damn good weekend there, Dave. We appreciate the time as always, bro.
Anytime, fellas. Good talking to you.
Love you,
Yes,
Davey.
sir.
Bye.